Welcome everyone to our 8th year of Entrepreneurship 101. I am so amazed at the crowd that's come out tonight. This is just fantastic. My name is Keri Damen. I'm the Director of Entrepreneurship Education here at Mars. I'm going to be explaining about what we do here at Mars and what this course is, but first I wanted to get a sense of who you are. We have at least 400 people here and about 200 plus on the webcast. So this is our biggest crowd ever and we're super excited, so thanks for coming. Who here is just thinking about entrepreneurship? Can you put your hand up? Who has an idea or has just one idea? One that you're sure it's going to work. Who has a bunch of ideas and has been waiting your whole life for this chance? We love you guys. They're good. Who's already working on their startup? Excellent. So just to give you a sense of who you are, last year when we did the demographics at the end of the year, we found that about 60% of the attendees to Entrepreneurship 101 were working on something. That doesn't mean they were at the beginning, but by the end they were. So this is your journey. This is your time to take the first steps, if you haven't already, to becoming an entrepreneur. And we're going to talk about why it's so important, because entrepreneurship is incredibly important. So before I get started, I just wanted to first do a shout out. I wonder if I can find him here. Oh, there he is. See if he sees me. Tony. We have to do a thank you to Tony Redpath, who started this program. Hi, Tony. So Tony's over there. If you could just put your hand up, Tony. Tony started this program 8 years ago, and it was started with a small group that he built with Cynthia Go at the University of Toronto, and it was probably less than 20 people. And now look at it now. There's about 600 people, including the webcast. So thanks very much, Tony. Your baby is all grown up now, and I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to run such a great program. I also would like to thank our sponsors. This course is free because of the generous support of CIBC over the last 6 years. In particular, I'd like to thank Joan Peters, who's the Director of Community Investments, and David Bagown, the VP of Government, Regulatory and Public Affairs, who was also very helpful in supporting our Upstart competition last year. So with that, I would like to get started. So first I want to really let you know why it matters so much that you're here. We're going to talk about why entrepreneurship matters. We're going to link that into Mars's mission and why we're a nonprofit charity that's trying to build businesses. It seems like kind of a strange charity. You're like, you want to build businesses, but you're a charity. We're going to talk about what is entrepreneurship and do you have what it takes? What does the entrepreneurial mind look like? What are the skills and sort of mindset of entrepreneurs? Then we'll talk a little bit about the course. I hope you've seen a little bit online. It's a year-long course that culminates in an Upstart competition at the end of the course. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the other resources that Mars offers. And finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about the first step to your entrepreneurial journey, which is finding and validating your idea. Some of you guys already have ideas, so we'll just talk about how you can validate or test them in the market. And other ones are desperate for the freedom and power that having your own business can give you, and you're still looking for that idea. So some of this will help. And then lastly, we'll talk about stamp cards, which you'll get on the way out. These will help us with registration, and I'll explain more later. So the first thing I want to talk about is why entrepreneurship matters, and I'd like to just show a video that was made by Dennis Whittle and the Kauffman Foundation. If you're not familiar with the Kauffman Foundation, it's an entrepreneurial foundation in the US in Kansas City that does great work. So I'm praying this video is going to work properly. We had some struggles.
Entrepreneurs do three things. They birth the new in a simple way. That is to say, every type of innovation we have has largely come from people thinking innovatively, and most of them come from firms that were created to bring forth this new technology that the inventor entrepreneur thought up. The second thing they do is even much more important, and that is when new firms are started, they create jobs. This is actually quite apparent, but economists and policymakers and politicians don't get this. You know, if you're running General Electric or General Motors, your stockholders want higher productivity. They want more product coming out for less expense. It's a simple equation. It's the amount of product divided by the number of people who work in the company. And if you're the president of one of those companies, your job is to drive that number on the denominator down. You want fewer people. Well, if you start a brand new company and you're going to make something, you're going to deliver a service or a product, you got to have people. So you don't want to have more employees than necessary. But without employees, you got nothing. So new firms hire. And in fact, the statistics from the Kauffman Foundation tell us that new firms are the place where all new hiring takes place, the net job creation. And it's not a small number. On average, new firms in the United States create about 3 million jobs a year. In fact, at the margin, that is where all the jobs are that are created in the economy that are new, it's the new firms that do it. Put differently, the United States, unlike a lot of countries, has a growing population, has a growing labor force. We need 3 million brand new jobs every year. That's if everybody else kept their job. With the entry of young people, with the coming of immigrants, with people returning to the labor market, we need 3 million new jobs every year. And those jobs, the vast preponderance, almost all of them, come in firms that are less than 5 years old. Now, the third thing that entrepreneurs do with their new companies is they create all the new net wealth in the society. So if we didn't have new companies, the society would gradually grow in relative terms poorer. Now, we think about entrepreneurs as actually sometimes becoming very rich. We have in mind Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or Sergey Brin. These guys get very, very wealthy. But in fact, the real wealth goes into the society. It's estimated that the people who start these firms take a fraction, in some cases less than 1%, of all the new net wealth that their companies generate for the society. Think about what Bill Gates did with Microsoft. Now, he made a fortune for himself, tens of billions of dollars. But he's made every one of us richer in economic terms. We are all much better off. So these are all the things that entrepreneurs do. They keep pushing the innovative, they push the new, they make jobs for people, and they make wealth for the society. America and the world will, as long as human beings walk this planet, need innovators, need inventors, need entrepreneurs.
So that's why entrepreneurship matters. Not only do innovations help you in your life, they create jobs and wealth for both individuals and society. And this is very tied into why Mars exists. So innovation and entrepreneurship, they drive productivity and global competitiveness, and the majority of new jobs are actually created in really small firms. So only a small fraction of the entrepreneurs that come through Mars will be the next Nortel or RIM, but those companies are so powerful, they can create whole clusters in communities. And even if your company doesn't have big, like has 1,000 people, it's still important to create small companies for job creation. So young, high-growth firms create the majority of new jobs in modern economies. And we know in Ontario that we're losing jobs, so it becomes central to Ontario's future to create new companies. So who is Mars? Who is here for the first time? They've never heard of Mars. They're like, what happens in that building? Who thinks we're a research institute? Oh, we're doing better. That's good. We're not a research institute. So we're actually a nonprofit charity that's an innovation center. So we are focused on helping to build the next generation of Canadian companies. We help entrepreneurs start and grow their companies. So basically, we're trying to be a place in the area around us is called the Discovery District. So you've got University of Toronto and lots of major research hospitals. This is a really important place in Canada for research and innovation. And Mars wants to be the neutral sandbox in that area to bring those communities together to foster innovation. So we're bringing science, business, and capital together to improve the efficiency and output of the commercialization process. We're also connected around the province to 14 different regional innovation centers. So there's great work being done across the province, and we're all working together. And we're also webcasting this across Canada. So we're starting to connect nationally as well. This is the building that you're in. It's the Heritage Building, and you might not know the history of this building, but actually it's a really special place. It's the old Toronto General Hospital, and it's where the first clinical trials of insulin took place, among other inventions. So it's a really important building, and we're really lucky to be in this building, to be working on innovation and commercialization in a building that has already had an impact on millions of people's lives. So as I mentioned, this area around Mars is really special. Not only do you have Bay Street, you've got the financial district, you've got the university, all the hospitals, you've got Queen's Park, and there's lots of arts and cultural institutions. So we're trying to bring all those organizations together as much as we can to create an urban innovation hub. This is the building today. You might have noticed that we have a little bit of construction happening on one side. That's phase 2, which will open, I think, in about a year, and that will double our size to 1.5 million square feet. So who's in here? So actually, the people that work for Mars are a fraction of who's actually in the building. We have about 2,000 people working in this building and about 80 organizations. And it's a real mix of public and private. Everybody's involved in innovation in some way. Again, we're trying to create that innovation community and hub where people know where to go for, to access new companies. So we've got everything from 2 different incubators that have companies that are small companies that are actually located here to venture capital firms and other public organizations that work to foster innovation. So the 3 flags that you see, the Convergence Innovation, that's that idea of science, business, and capital converging together in this neutral sandbox of sorts to get those great ideas that are happening in the Mars or the Discovery District around Mars to the market faster, so that we're creating jobs faster with the great science and research that's going on. So how do we help entrepreneurs? So Entrepreneurship 101 is sort of the beginning of this funnel. So we have lots and lots of programs, which I'll talk about, that are actually open to the public like this. We're trying to get people excited and thinking about entrepreneurship, change the culture to be a more entrepreneurial culture, and help those that are already thinking entrepreneurially. We also have a number of services that are for clients only. So we'll talk probably in a couple weeks about, in more detail about what the business advisory services do. But beyond Entrepreneurship 101, you can actually become a client of our advisory services. And they offer resources such as market research, business advice and mentorship, and access to capital. It depends on what stage you're at. Not everybody gets access to everything. But there is a whole area that works with clients in more detail. So the business advisory services, we are focused on technology entrepreneurs, healthcare and life sciences, ICT, which we call ICE, which is ICT plus entertainment, clean tech, and social innovation. If you're not familiar with social innovation, I'll actually explain it in a couple slides. We are generally focused on technology and social innovation, but I think if you're outside of that sector, you'll find a lot of the Entrepreneurship 101 will apply to you, because a lot of it is business fundamentals. So even though the advisory services might not be a fit at this time, there's other programs at Mars that can help general entrepreneurs. So if you went to an advisor, what would they help you with? So there's a list there under support. They could help you with financing, market competitive intelligence, legal, corporate governance, operations, and process. So we have this vast network of actually mostly volunteer advisors that have worked in startups or have worked in corporations, and they volunteer their time to come and meet with startups. I think there's over 100 volunteer advisors that work with companies. So if you want to see sort of what the breakdown is of the areas at Mars, the biggest chunk is the information technology, communication, and entertainment area with about 46. Then after that's clean tech, so renewable energy, water, those kinds of technologies, life sciences and healthcare, which is biotech, pharmaceuticals, medical devices, that's about 17%, and social purposes 14%. And we have about 1,200 clients. So the area that you've just experienced by coming in here is Mars Education. So my team runs a number of events, which Entrepreneurship 101 is obviously the largest one. I'll explain a couple of the other event series because they're open to the public as well. And we have a number of online resources in the Entrepreneur's Toolkit, which we'll get into in a little bit. For clients, we offer more in-depth education, some what we call the Entrepreneur's Toolkit workshops. And when I talk about the Upstart Competition, we actually run those workshops for people who are interested in really getting their pitch up to speed even before applying to the competition, because we want to give people a chance to go a little bit more in depth so that they really give it a shot even to get into the competition. So we're pretty active around here. We actually ran about 140 events last year with 10,000 people and 16,000 hours of education. We also run workshops across Ontario at those 14 innovation centers. So we're doing a lot. Entrepreneurship 101 is the start, and probably the series, if you attend weekly, we're going to be talking about the Mars Best Practices series. It's our intermediate series. And it doesn't follow a structure like Entrepreneurship 101. It jumps around and goes in depth on topics depending on what our clients are asking for and what you guys are telling us you want in surveys. So that one, and it's a totally different format. It's a small group of like 30 or 40 people in the room. And unfortunately, with this size of audience, we sort of are stuck into a lecture style, but I know that's not the best way to learn. So the Best Practices series allows us to have more interaction between the speaker. It's more like a conversation in some ways. There's a number of other series, the Mars Market Insights series. The market intelligence team here at Mars does a lot of research on different sectors and up-and-coming sectors and produces papers that they launch at Mars Market Insights series. And they bring together really fantastic panels that are a corporation, what they're doing in that space, a startup entrepreneur, what they're doing in that space, and a market research vendor, what they're learning about that space internationally. And the Entrepreneur's Toolkit I'll get into later. It's actually broken right now, so please don't go there. We just moved our website to like a mobile site that operates on all devices. And as anybody who knows websites or works with websites knows that when you fix something, you often break about 15 other things. So what is entrepreneurship? What I find interesting is when I talk to people and I say, oh, I work with entrepreneurs, I sometimes talk to people who are small business owners or work for themselves, and they don't even identify as being entrepreneurs. I think females are actually, particularly, don't necessarily say I'm an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur, the word has a connotation of you're a real go-getter, you know, really bucking the trend of the corporate life, but a lot of people are more entrepreneurial than they realize. And the definition of it is basically that you are able to identify opportunities, allocate resources, and create value through the identification of unmet needs or opportunities. So you look out into the environment, you see that there's a gap or there's something that people need, and you figure out how to get the resources to do that and to meet that need for a profit. If you want to talk about what social entrepreneurship is and why Mars got into social entrepreneurship, or what we call social innovation, it's still a business. It has many of the same characteristics as a business, but they kind of add an extra layer of they're trying to alleviate or solve a social problem. Probably the company, I know it's controversial in some respects, but probably the most famous social innovation company is Tom's Shoes. So does anybody know the story of Tom's Shoes? Yeah, so some of you do. So in Africa, they take the products, sort of recycled materials, they bring them back, make shoes, and when you buy a pair of Tom's shoes, they give an African somewhere a pair of shoes. It's controversial because people say you're putting Africans out of work selling shoes and things. But they are trying to use resources better and give back. So that's an example of a social innovation. So anyone who knows me knows I love Peter Drucker. He's a famous management theorist, wrote tons and tons of good stuff if you have lots of time on your hands. And this is a good quote. He said, "The purpose of a business is to find and serve customers profitably." It sounds so simple, but so many people, we'll talk about it a bit more later, they get lost in the idea. And they think this is the next great technology, or I've got this great idea and everybody's going to want it. And they lose sight of, does the customer actually want it? Do they actually want to pay what you're asking? And they lose sight of the customer a little bit. So we're going to make sure that in our course we're always talking about meeting customer needs. So it's interesting because being in this space, there's entrepreneurship education sprouting up everywhere. Everybody's talking about entrepreneurship. Everybody's making accelerators and all these kind of incubators to try to build companies. In the US, in Europe, everywhere is desperate to really foster innovation and entrepreneurship. So there's lots of studies about trying to kind of bottle what entrepreneurs have in their head and see if we can replicate that faster than the next country. There was sort of a meta study that I really liked that was kind of saying, you know, who are entrepreneurs, what makes them different, and how do we get other people to be like that? And they did find, when they looked at all these studies, some of the ways that they are different. So one thing they found was that they have the opportunity recognizing mind. So if you've ever spent a lot of time, does anyone here have an entrepreneurial parent? Do they always like say ideas where they're like, oh, they should do this or they should do that. Yeah. So I come from an entrepreneurial family, and they're always seeing how the business could be fixed or what they're lacking, or they just have this mind that recognizes opportunities. And often they have the curse of too many ideas. The designing mind is an interesting mind too. It's more of a holistic view. So maybe not so much like in business school, you go and you learn marketing, or you learn finance, or you learn one function. An entrepreneurial mind is an ability to put all those functions together. And every year people say, oh, I wish you guys could just do Entrepreneurship 101 in a certain linear fashion. And unfortunately, it's really hard, because you have to be thinking about your team when you're thinking about where you're getting your money, when you're developing your product or service. It's not a linear process. So the designing mind is thinking of all these parts all together and putting them together at all times. Number 3 that they found, sort of a key theme in all the studies, was the risk managing mind. We sort of think of entrepreneurs as risk takers. And I actually think that if you're a smart entrepreneur, you're a risk manager. You know there's risks out there. You know there's going to be challenges. You know things are going to fall apart. There's going to be successes and failures. But you're able to foresee them as best you can so that you can manage those risks. Next week we have the Bruce Poon-Tip, the founder of G Adventures, or formerly known as Gap Adventures, coming. And I think he's going to talk about some of the challenges that he had getting funding. I think at one point he was using his credit cards to pay his staff, right? So the risks are there, but they have to be able to manage them. Number 4, the resilient mind. This is pretty self-explanatory. That's the managing the ups and downs. And believe me, there's a real gap between when you first start something and all your money's just going out, and before you actually start having money come in. And that's when you have to be super resilient and believe in your dream and take the ups and the downs. Making that first sale is a perfect example of how resilient you have to be. And the last one is the effectuating mind. And this is it's sort of how entrepreneurs are very action-oriented. So they wouldn't necessarily write like a 100-page business plan and then methodically go through and do everything exactly how they planned. They're very action-oriented, so they might write a 1-page business plan or a 5-page business plan just to sort of get their thoughts on paper, and then they go out and do it. And they see what the market says, what is the feedback they're getting. They go back and they go, okay, that didn't work. My assumptions on that were wrong, and they change, but they're continually taking action. And this is the first challenge, is we see so many great ideas. There are a million great ideas out there, but you have to take action. And even if that means small failures, big failures, you'll learn through each time. So that constant moving forward, taking action to realize your dream. One thing that's really interesting when you talk about who entrepreneurs are and is what their motivations are. And I should have asked you before I showed this slide, like, did you think they would be motivated mostly by money? Well, I blew it because I showed the slide. But they're not, which is really, really interesting. They're motivated by impact. They want to make a difference. They love the creative process. They want the experience. Actually, the average age of an entrepreneur is 40. And generally what happens, and that you think that's kind of crazy, because at 40, usually you'd have a family and some kids and a mortgage. That's the riskiest time. It's easier to be an entrepreneur if hopefully you got out of undergrad or grad school without any debt. That would be the easiest time, you'd think. But actually, people who have worked and gotten lots of experience have started to see gaps in where they could find a business, and they have enough experience and confidence to go it on their own. So also, they know they have the experience. This is actually a good, if you want to learn more, this is from the Startup Genome Report that was put out last year. It's really interesting. So, the million-dollar question, can you learn entrepreneurship? I am completely biased. I totally think you can learn entrepreneurship. I think that you can learn everything. So Ernst & Young surveyed about 700 entrepreneurs for its Entrepreneur of the Year thing last year. And one thing they found was about 60% of them identified themselves as transitioned entrepreneurs. So they had been working somewhere else and became an entrepreneur. So they weren't naturally born and said, from day one, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, that's what I'm going to be. They actually were doing something else, and like I said, they got an idea, they thought about it, they felt they had the experience, and they made the jump. Of those people that they surveyed, they also found if you asked them what was the most important thing for them becoming an entrepreneur. About a third said their corporate experience or their experience in the work world. A third said, just under a third said their school experience, what they learned at school. So what they learned in the corporate world, what they learned at school, and then the other third said it was mentors. Well, mentoring is also learning. So I truly believe that entrepreneurship can be learned. I think you have to have the drive for it. You've got to have the gumption and the guts. But I think the skills can be learned through advisors and mentors and the community around you, and through places like Mars that provide tools. So here's an example of the impact of mentors. So obviously we have an advisory service, and we believe very strongly that having the right community around you can really help accelerate your business. This is a chart that shows the average funding raised by stage. So the green line, it says, is they had helpful mentors, and the red line is they didn't have helpful mentors. So as you go through Entrepreneurship 101, we'll talk a bit about the course, but we've got opportunities to meet other entrepreneurs here, either through the Meet the Entrepreneurs events, or through doing the workshops, or participating in an Upstart competition. And if you become a Mars client, through peer-to-peer groups, form that network. Get other people that are doing the same thing and bounce ideas off them. It will only help you. So as I said, we can't create entrepreneurial drive. That desire has to come from you, but you're here. You took the first step. So what we can do is help you accelerate your ideas by providing you with tools, advice, and networks. Now, the course. So the course, when Tony first started it, was very much aimed at a university crowd, science, engineering, medical researchers, and others building technology companies in a university or hospital lab. It's grown to be much broader than that, and to tackle entrepreneurship at large, and to also take on social entrepreneurs. So the business topics, as I said, if you're not in a technology or social innovation company, I totally encourage you to attend or watch the webcast, because I think there's a lot of great speakers that are coming, and they can only help you. But if you do have an idea, if you keep your idea in mind throughout the course, I think you'll find it to be more of value. Try to make steps in each direction, because it is a lecture series, and it's limited by our format, and action is needed on the other end. So we've tried to make it shorter. It's impossible. There's so much. I mean, we're trying to do each topic in 1 week. So we're 30 sessions, weekly lecture series, Wednesdays 6 to 7. 23 of them are key topics. You have, I think at the door, got the schedule, and it'll be updated as we fill out each of the speakers. We have 2 lived it lectures, which is where we bring in the really big name, celebrated entrepreneurs. In the past, we've had Michael McCain and Harry Rosen and Ian Telfer from Goldcorp, and some really inspiring speakers. If you are interested in hearing those guys and gals, we do have a video section on our website, and you can click Lived It Lectures and hear all the great speakers. We are also going to have 4 Meet the Entrepreneurs panels. So these are the networking events. So we're going to do them in each sector: clean tech, ICT, social innovation, and healthcare and life sciences. So what we'll do is have a panel of 3 startups that are building their company right now. So you'll have everything from lectures, the business topics, to the celebrated entrepreneurs, and then in the middle are the startups, how they're doing it right now, how they're finding balancing their life with their dream, and that kind of stuff. And those sessions are followed by networking sessions. So we have food and drinks out here, and we encourage people to come and meet. And we ask actually other Mars clients to come as well, to meet you as well, trying to get people mixing. And then the course culminates in the Upstart Competition, which is a business pitch competition to recognize and reward promising participants. I was actually on CBC Metro Morning today with the winner of last year's Upstart Competition Life Bike, which is a lightweight electric bike. It was really cool. He rode his bike in. It's kind of like Dragon's Den, but nicer. We're much nicer. Honestly, we are. So they're starting the year off with a bang. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Gap Adventures. I've gone on a couple of the trips. They're awesome. We're going to hear from Bruce Poon-Tip, who built it from the ground up, and he is next week from 6 to 7. And now I'll talk a little bit about sort of how we've organized the course and what's going to happen in each lecture. So the first section, it's in 5 modules, and the first section is the journey begins. And that's sort of all the things you need to think about in the beginning. And then we'll go through model, market, management, and money. And I tried to get an M for the first one, but I really couldn't find one. So if anyone think of a better name. So what's in the journey begins. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about finding and validating your idea, the first step. In 2 weeks, we're going to talk about different types of entrepreneurship. That lecture will look at, do you want to be a for-profit business, a not-for-profit business, non-for-profit? If you're a for-profit, do you want to be a social innovation or just sort of a regular business? What do those different types of entrepreneurship mean when it comes to funding models and that sort of thing? Actually, I switched them. Sorry. The next one is entrepreneurial ecosystem and legal fundamentals. And that's looking at the ecosystem, like thinking about when you incorporate, talking to lawyers, when and how and for what, and that kind of stuff. So just looking at the whole ecosystem and going, what are you going to need, who you're going to need, and when. We have a new lecture this year, Introduction to Entrepreneurial Management. We're building a resource guide. It's not ready yet, but we're going to build you guys a guide that you can download that will have some of the best entrepreneur books, because there's a lot of sort of famous books that we'll be talking about, and it'll have some of that in there, and a lot of that will be covered in this Intro to Entrepreneurial Management, Crossing the Chasm, those kinds of books if you've been reading in the space. Then value proposition, the centerpiece of all your marketing and sales efforts is having a clear, concise, one sentence that explains your value to your customer. It's really, really important. We actually even do numerous workshops on it with entrepreneurs because it's such an important piece. And product development, and Steve Karkner comes and talks every year about product development. He's developed products for RIM and all kinds of companies, so he's really a great product development speaker. Second module is money, or model, and it's about how you'll make money. So we'll look at IP management, so IP, intellectual property, copyrights, trademarks, patents, those kinds of things. If you're not a technology company, it still applies. You still have to think about copyrights and trademarks and these kinds of things. Talk about your business model. So how are you going to make money? It's like, is it e-commerce? Are you going to sell through distributors, that kind of stuff? We've got a really neat way of sort of planning out your business model that we'll show you. And we'll be talking about business plan and other communication tools. So if you're in this sort of science area, you might need to write thought leadership paper, white papers. For others, it might mean an elevator pitch or a business plan. Market. A couple years ago, we only had a couple marketing lectures, but we keep building this section. And I think because we sort of look around, and every time I go and talk to entrepreneurs in the US, I'm so amazed by their ability to sell. And I think, and I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, but I think Canadians, because we're so used to trees selling themselves and oil selling itself, we're not like Americans and optimistic, strong salespeople. We're a little bit meek and mild, because there's so much great technology, but we need to be pounding the pavement and out there selling. So we're going through market analysis with the market intelligence team. We'll talk to you about that. We'll talk about marketing communications, things like public relations, building your website, social media, go-to-market strategy. How are you going to get your product to market? And what are the steps in doing that? Sales. This one will be business-to-business sales. The business-to-consumer sales will be more in marketing communications. New lecture this year, negotiation. So negotiating those agreements along the way for getting to your market. And lastly, distribution. And managing your A-team or building your A-team, management. I think a lot of people focus on some of the hard parts in entrepreneurship. They focus on IP. That seems like a really hard, complicated subject, or how to get venture capitalists to invest in them. They might overlook a little bit the people part, the people piece, because they think, oh, that's easy, you just hire people. It's actually a really important piece, and it can be quite hard. So we're going to look at building a board of advisors or a board, and when do you do that, and what kind of skills do you look for, and how do you work with them. We'll talk about financial planning, which is budgeting, recruiting, and a new lecture this year is building and managing a team. So I think it's a really important piece. How do you manage your team? Because with the right team, even if your idea is a little off, you can iterate and turn it into something useful. And the most important module that everybody loves the most is the last one, and it's about money and funding your business. Yes, we save the best for last. So one of my favorite lectures is bootstrapping. For those not familiar with bootstrapping, bootstrapping is basically when you're self-funding yourself. So I would say 98% of businesses, I don't know the exact number, have to bootstrap. So you might have to sell your services as a consultant or something while you're funding your product development. Or there's something that you're doing and you're getting money from friends, family, and fools, or angel investors, or just, it's kind of like everything goes and you're super lean and you're working out of your garage or your mom's office or something while you're getting it going. Then we talk about, and actually, you'd be surprised, a lot of really famous companies, even Apple in the very beginning was bootstrapped. And then we talk about, investors. So we have 2 lectures, Terms of Investments, which is talking about the term sheet. So if you did go and got capital from a venture capitalist, what kind of agreement did they get you to sell, and sort of explaining those terms and what they're looking for. And then we have a VC panel, a venture capitalist panel, so they come in and tell you sort of how to approach them, what they're looking for, and how it sort of works. And that's always a really great session. They're really tell it like it is. And finally, the course ends with the pitch. So the pitch is super important. Obviously, we have a pitch competition. The pitch can be a customer pitch, it can be investor pitch, and we'll be sort of talking about them both. So at the registration desk, we have the schedule and some of the ways that you can connect. There's a number of ways. We'll talk about these again in a little bit, but these are the stamp cards. So when you leave today, we'll give everybody one of these cards, and it has the first one stamped. So you're already good for this session. And the reason we use these cards is we actually give out certificates for attending 20 of the 30 sessions. We're not a degree granting institution, so it's not a formal certificate, but we've been asked over the years, can you give me something that shows that I attended this? I can put on my resume, or we also use these for the Upstart Competition eligibility. Again, it's 20 out of 30. We do have live webcasts, as I mentioned earlier. Oh, and I forgot to do a shout out to Sheridan College. I hope they're still watching. So the live webcasts, we would be able to record your registration there as well, so it can be a mix. The 20 can be like 10 live events and 10 on the webcast. You can also, we do record each of these sessions and put it online as a video. So you can watch them anytime. You could go tomorrow and watch all last year's videos. But we can't obviously record that you're watching for attendance reasons. So there's the link there, and it's also on the sheet. We started a LinkedIn group last year, and I'm not sure, Marielle, how many people in the LinkedIn group? Like 1,000?
It's over 400.
Yeah, it's over 400. And the idea behind that group is we want to, if you have a question for the speaker, Marielle usually posts before the week to say, tell us your questions up front, what your expectations, what you want to learn, or we can have discussions after. Or if we find great articles or you find great articles, we can post around that topic. And then if you signed up online, you just have to sign up once for the whole course. And if you sign up every week, you're going to get sent millions of newsletters. So just sign up once, and you get a newsletter every Monday, and that will have information about next week's session, the video for last week's session, and then anytime we hear of any sort of entrepreneurial competitions or things that are happening in the community that we think you should know about, we'll put some news and stuff there. And if you hear of stuff, let us know, and we'll add it to the newsletter. The Upstart Competition. So the Upstart Competition is the culmination of the program, and it happens in 4 stages. So we, as I mentioned before, we sort of encourage people that are even interested in applying to get into the competition to go through a workshop series. We found in the past that people that did these workshops, they were just miles ahead of other people. So we thought that's not really fair. We should tell everybody, if you're serious about this competition, just go in these 3 workshops. We promise it'll be worth your while. We'll be announcing formally that the competition, everything about the competition in November. But basically in January, we have the Entrepreneur's Toolkit workshops, 3 4-hour workshops. We have people apply with a 2 to 3 page executive summary in early February. Everybody, depending on how many we have, we will have those people come in and meet with an advisor for sort of an initial interview. Of those, we'll select 10 companies to go into the competition. Those 10 companies will work for 2 months, as much time as you want to put into it with your advisor to hone your pitch. So they work in March and April with you. And then the competition happens in May for a $10,000 prize. And we actually have had other prizes be added sort of over the years. Sometimes we get in-kind legal services. We had an anonymous donor give us $10,000 for a social purpose prize. So we're hoping to bump that up a little bit, but it's a good chunk of money to get things going. And basically, it's a 10-minute pitch to a panel of investors. And they'll give you they do some questions at the end, and they'll give you some feedback. So we've had some interesting past winners. As I mentioned, Life Bike won last year. They had a really cool lightweight electric bike. The year before, we had 2 prizes. We had Eve Medical. It was a medical device to test for STDs at home. So basically, it was something you could buy from the pharmacy. So it was a real innovative, and it won, I believe it won the Social Innovation Prize, because if you could get something like that in a developing country, that would be life-changing for them. The Hotplate won the main prize. It was a multimedia platform for quick, simple, affordable cooking. Basically, really short, innovative cooking videos. 2010, the winner was Shape Collage, which was an automatic photo collage maker. And they were, I think it was started during the time of Entrepreneurship 101, and he was making a lot of money by the end. That was a rapidly growing company. DreamQ won in 2009, and they worked with Apple on developing the hardware portion of their UI remote, which turned an iPhone into a universal remote. And then in 2008, probably the greatest success of a company that's been through Entrepreneurship 101 so far, they won second in the Upstart competition, so we might have blown it on that one. We should have... It's like Dragon's Den, right? They might not be the final say about who's going to be the winner. Cognivision, they were acquired by Intel in 2010. They made digital retail screens. So you know the ones you see like in the subway or in stores? Their screens were interactive, so they could change based on the demographics of who you were. So they could say, you know, female between these ages, and change to what you might be interested in. So a real, they would change the screen content in real time. So it's a crazy marketing tool. Eligibility for the Upstart competition. So you have to be registered in Entrepreneurship 101. So if you didn't register, please register. And you have to attend 20 sessions, as I mentioned, via stamp card or webcast. It can be a business that you've already started or just wish to start, but you're going to have to accelerate it if you haven't done any research or any sort of thinking about it by the competition starts. We did have some companies that were so rapidly growing that we had to put a cap on the number of investment and the number that they've made in revenue. So those are both 100K. So we don't want you to have had more than $100,000 in investment from investors or $100,000 in revenue, just to keep it fair. And because you have to work with Mars advisors, we restrict the competition to the 4 categories of ICT, clean tech, social ventures, or life sciences. And because we're webcasting across Canada right now, we know there's lots of entrepreneurship competitions elsewhere, and we want to keep this one local, so we have to be located in the GTA. Sorry about that if you're outside of the GTA. And before I get into finding and validating your idea, I just wanted to talk a little bit about our poor, broken Entrepreneur's Toolkit. We started developing content about 3 years ago. We have over 1,000 videos, over 500 articles, 18 workbooks. So we've developed all this content for entrepreneurs to help you accelerate your business. So basically, there's lots of articles and videos by topic. You can just click on a topic. Say if I click on funding your business, I would get a subtopic, and then all the contents underneath. You also notice at the top, you can see sort of 3 in the blue is Entrepreneurship 101. So Entrepreneurship 101, if you're you're like, I can't wait 30 weeks. This is too long. I want to just get everything. We've got the 20 lectures from last year are each there. So if I clicked one of the sessions, say I click the session 18 of 20, that's the raising money, that's the VC panel. So the old video is there. There's some related resources, workbooks, all that stuff is packaged up for you, ready to go if you need it now. We also have a funding sources database. So for the technology sectors that Mars works with, we're trying to make it easier for entrepreneurs to find places that have funding programs. So if you click on the funding sources, you can search by sector and location. So that if you're brand new to this area and you want to sort of see what programs are out there, this is useful and will be working soon. I'm sorry about that. And lastly, probably one of the most valuable parts of our education are the workbooks. So we developed about 20 workbooks that are, when we looked online, we're like, oh, how to write a business plan. We found these things were like either like 100 pages and totally complicated. So we were like, let's make it simple, clear, and concise so people can actually do it, and they will do it, because if you make it hard, they won't do it. So we tried to make workbooks that take you through really practical, valuable stuff, and they often have like a template or something that you can work in. And then we actually created the workshops around the workbooks. So if you can't get into a workshop, the workbooks are actually the content, of the workshops. So you can see some of the examples are building an early stage B2B sales forecast. We've got some life sciences one about building your target product profile, in vitro diagnostic products, marketing communications, financing workbook, developing a financing strategy for your company. So that's setting out when you're going to need the money, your milestones for your company. And I've got about 10 minutes left, so I just want to talk a little bit about finding your idea. So we're going to play a video from a book called Where Good Ideas Come From by Stephen Johnson.
For the past 5 years, I've been investigating this question of where good ideas come from. It's the kind of problem I think all of us are intrinsically interested in. We want to be more creative, we want to come up with better ideas, we want our organizations to be more innovative. I've looked at this problem from an environmental perspective. What are the spaces that have historically led to unusual rates of creativity and innovation? And what I've found in all of these systems, there are these recurring patterns that you see again and again that are crucial to creating environments that are unusually innovative. One pattern I call the slow hunch, that breakthrough ideas almost never come in a moment of great insight, in a sudden stroke of inspiration. Most important ideas take a long time to evolve, and they spend a long time dormant in the background. It isn't until the idea has had 2 or 3 years, sometimes 10 or 20 years to mature, that it suddenly becomes accessible to you and useful to you in a certain way. And this is partially because good ideas normally come from the collision between smaller hunches, so that they form something bigger than themselves. So you see a lot in the history of innovation, cases of someone who has half of an idea. There's a great story about the invention of the World Wide Web and Tim Berners-Lee. This is a project that Berners-Lee worked on for 10 years. But when he started, he didn't have a full vision for this new medium he was going to invent. He started working on one project as a side project to help him organize his own data. He scrapped that after a couple years, and he started working on another thing. And only after about 10 years did the full vision of the World Wide Web come into being. That is, more often than not, how ideas happen. They need time to incubate, and they spend a lot of time in this partial hunch form. The other thing that's important when you think about ideas this way is that when ideas take form in this hunch state, they need to collide with other hunches. Oftentimes, the thing that turns a hunch into a real breakthrough is another hunch that's lurking in somebody else's mind. And you have to figure out a way to create systems that allow those hunches to come together and turn into something bigger than the sum of their parts. That's why, for instance, the coffee house in the Age of the Enlightenment, or the Parisian salons of modernism, were such engines of creativity, because they created a space where ideas could mingle and swap and create new forms. When you look at the problem of innovation from this perspective, it sheds a lot of important light on the debate we've been having recently about what the internet is doing to our brains. Are we getting overwhelmed with an always connected, multitasking lifestyle? And is that going to lead to less sophisticated thoughts as we move away from the slower, deeper, contemplative state of reading, for instance? Obviously, I'm a big fan of reading, but I think it's important to remember that the great driver of scientific innovation and technological innovation has been the historic increase in connectivity and our ability to reach out and exchange ideas with other people, and to borrow other people's hunches and combine them with our hunches and turn them into something new. That really has, I think, been, more than anything else, the primary engine of creativity and innovation over the last 600 or 700 years. And so yes, it's true we're more distracted. But what has happened that is really miraculous and marvelous over the last 15 years is that we have so many new ways to connect and so many new ways to reach out and find other people who have that missing piece that will complete the idea we're working on, or to stumble serendipitously across some amazing new piece of information that we can use to build and improve our own ideas. That's the real lesson of where good ideas come from, that chance favors the connected mind.
Chance favors the connected mind. It's a really great book if you want to feel really inspired. There was a great tweet up there that I have to mention. Somebody said they were here to get the ideas out of the prison of their mind and into the world. And I think that's what we are here for, is to start taking those steps to really move on your entrepreneurial journey. So finding your idea. So I think there's a real myth that exists that, you know, somebody just thought up a great idea in a dorm room and they're billionaire, or people had, like, an apple fell on their head like Newton and they got a great idea. And I think that's a real myth, as this video points out. A lot of great innovations come from connectivity, and they come from their slow hunches over a long period of time. So if you don't have the great idea now, just start looking for it. I promise you it'll come. So when I thought about the different entrepreneurial stories I knew about, I thought, well, where did they get their ideas? And here are some of the places they got their ideas. They scratched their own itch. So you can use your experience to identify and solve problems. Basically, you want to create products you would use, or create services you would use. You could brainstorm about what are the irritants in your life that you could find something to find a solution for. We had a great lived it lecture presenter from FreshBooks, Mike McDermott. The video is online. I totally recommend it. He's an awesome speaker. It's a company from Waterloo that's actually growing really fast and is quite international now. And he started out as a graphic designer. So he had a small business of his own, and he was a little frustrated that he couldn't find accounting software that really worked for him. So he created it. And then he went, wow, if I like this, if I need this, and I like using this, other people will too. And he created a business around that. So that's the scratching your own itch. That's a way to find ideas, is to think about what would you like to have, or what problem do you need solved. Another way, and probably the way that happens quite often, maybe the most often, is iterating. It's not a flash of insight, but it's something that you started out doing and you sort of tested it and you found, oh, I just need to change it a little bit this way or a little bit that way. Like even Facebook was not Mark Zuckerberg's first idea. It was his third platform. So he'd already been out trying stuff and realized that, well, that worked and this didn't. And so it's iterating. It's just working on your idea and sort of seeing what sticks and what fits. Another way that you can come up with an idea is just to reassemble known elements in new ways. I'm always, the companies that come up where I'm like, damn, I wish I would have thought of that, are usually these ones. Somebody just took something out of the box from one industry and put it into another. I don't know if you've heard of the Shave Club. So it's new. Do you like it? Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's an amazing idea. You're like, damn, I wish I thought of that. So, you know, the razors are so expensive in the drugstore that they have like alarm bells, right? So the Shave Club knows that everybody needs to buy razors, but they're getting really irritated that every 4 years they go up by like 10 bucks. So you just sign up and they mail you a $1 razor once a month. So they've taken what's an existing business and they just found a new distribution model for it. It's genius. You never have to go buy razors and you're not spending a lot of money. So that's the reassembling, thinking of out of the box, what can I do that other people haven't thought of that's actually really a useful way of doing it? Obviously the collaboration, the talking and listening to those around you, that's the creating of the network that we're hoping that you'll use events around the city and at Mars to start creating your own network if you don't have one already. I think collaboration is also, another myth I think is that entrepreneurs are always sole entrepreneurs. And if you think of, Apple's a good example, is because there were the two Steves. There was the Steve Wozniak who just loved to tinker with the technology. He loved building that stuff. And he was just building for fun. He was a total hobbyist in his garage, and then he met Steve Jobs, and Steve Jobs was the marketing guy. He went, I know what we can do with that. That's genius. So together they were dynamo. And asking questions. This comes back to talking to the customer, find the customer, this actually turns entrepreneurship on its head. So instead of looking into the environment and trying to see what you can solve, this is like pretend you don't know anything and just go and ask your customer what their problems are. I actually have a mentor that does this. He started about 5 companies and he doesn't start with any ideas. He just says, I want to do something in this industry. So he uses all his contacts. He goes in and says, you know, what are your biggest problems? He's in IT, so he's building software. And ask them what their problems are. And in the beginning, he used to just go back. He's like, we've got something for that. And he'd just go back and build it. So balls of, like, you're just like, wow. Like, you're just going to go and find what the problem is and then solve it. So, I mean, it's like consulting, I guess, but building technology. So those are some of the ways that you can find your idea. If you have an idea, the next step is validating it. So validating is when you're going to take it to the market and test it. Most important part, because you have to sort of talk to the right people and make sure you're talking to the right market, because you might be surprised that you think it's going to fly in one market, but it's actually a parallel market or a completely different one. The importance of the customer, I can't overstate, because I think people fall in love with technology and they fall in love with the social problem they're solving, and they sort of don't talk to the market and customer enough. This is a quote from Sam Walton from Walmart. He said, there's only one boss, the customer, and they can fire everyone in the company from the chairman on down simply by spending their money somewhere else. So the #1 reason startups die is because they didn't have enough customers. So it's not because their technology wasn't good enough, or some of the other reasons you think about, it's because they didn't have enough customers. You got to talk to your customers early and find out what their problems are. So when we did a future leaders camp with teenagers, 13 to 15, and we had them come up with ideas, and we had them go and just take an idea that they'd come up with that morning and go around the building and ask people questions. Say, would you use this? Is this a problem you have? What would you pay for this? Does this matter to you? And they were surprised, because some things they thought were real problems, people were like, it's an irritant, but I'm not going to pay to solve it. But they got some really useful insights in that. So you want to talk to your customers. Are you solving a problem they have? Is it a true problem? Is it a serious problem? Is it like the bleeding neck wound that they have to solve now? You know, when you go and buy technology, there's all these great features. But what causes you to actually spend more money for another feature? You really want it. You've got to tap into that. What will make people open their wallets for something? Can you build it economically? And can you sell it profitably? So can you build it for a price that's less than you can sell it for? Basic business economics. So the goal is to achieve product market fit via trial and error early on in the development of your product. So that's how you validate your idea. So last thing, so please, if you're interested in the Upstart competition or getting the certificate, we have got already stamp cards that you can get on your way out. We do have to ask you to register them, so they have a number on the corner. So if you just email entrepreneurship101@marsdd.com. If you forget, just ask us next week. We'll say it again. Send your name and card number there, and we will have you on record. And we hope that you will keep attending. If there are any questions, we've got a couple mics. I might take a couple questions. Okay, thanks everybody. We'll stay after if you have any questions. Thanks.